Hello everyone, today we're checking out the theme for Chaos from Sonic DX. What? It's not... But it's a potato tomato. That's right, we're back on the Nightreign trail, and this time we're checking out MARIS. You may also remember MARIS as the spineless coward who keeps floating away. Get back here, Ludwig, I'm trying to up those numbers! As always, we're going to have an uninterrupted listening to each phase, followed by a breakdown, some lore talk in between, and of course, unhinged speculation. So, without further ado, let's check out Phase 1 of MARIS, Fathom of Night. Ooh, the woodwinds here. It's like an owl. And everything is like meditative. It's like the oh, a guitar. Or maybe a harp. It's like the different instruments are doing their different versions of whale songs? Ooh, taku, taku, taku. The low strings are kind of trying to make a melody happen. Something about this piece, I think, is very, very interesting. They're playing with different levels of dissonance, and they're keeping it pretty static. This is less of a story and more of a picture. Instead of having something melodic that kind of progresses gradually, it's like this moment frozen in time. That's so appropriate for the Maris fight for multiple reasons that we'll talk about when we talk about the lore, but I find it really interesting. It takes a lot of discipline to run something like this. It's something that I think the word I'm looking for is restraint. It takes a lot of restraint to make an entire first phase that almost doesn't move harmonically and doesn't catch a form melodically. And that's definitely 100% driven by what Maris is and what influenced its design. So I'm definitely waiting to dig into that. Yeah, this track is definitely one that stands out within the soundtrack, not necessarily because it's super memorable, but because it is so static. This track is a lot less of a dance, a lot less of a story. It's a lot more textural than what we have in the other tracks from the game. And I think it will be interesting to try and break it down and see what comprises these layers and what are we trying to achieve with them. So yeah, let's start breaking it down. So first and foremost, what we have is kind of a build-up of either an orchestral bass drum, perhaps other large percussions. It is something that kind of swells and it creates a space immediately. Now that is followed by a piano coming in, and then a percussive hit. It's a percussive hit with a lot of reverb on it. There is so much emphasis on space. And I definitely feel this is something that this track is kind of leaning into. So the piano is going back and forth between two notes. And I think it's the high strings are going like, ooh, but they're all catching like a couple of notes. They're catching one note. Perhaps it's one note that changes its pitch gradually. That's not how melodies move. These are not melodic parts for these instruments. These are textural parts. The whole thing only makes sense if you hear it together. And that also makes it quite the challenge to perform live, for example, because it's very difficult to perceive your part in the greater whole in pieces like this. You do have that in modern pieces, don't get me wrong, but it is something that is so not intuitive because we are melodic animals. We have a singular voice that comes out of us. So that's what we're familiar with. This automatically is creating something that is unfamiliar, dare I say, alien. So all of it is kind of moving in this meditative repetition where occasionally a different instrument with a different line will have an entirely disconnected note that could be very, very dissonant when combined with what's already there. But whatever happens to it, it keeps shifting, changing form. It's very difficult to perceive. It's very difficult to fathom. So by taking their time and staying on this texture and allowing it to kind of pulse, it makes you feel like time is moving slower. Now that's really interesting. There is like this bird call, like owl call, made from a woodwind, um, that definitely stands out because it doesn't have as clear of a pitch as everything that came so far. Like whatever comes in, it's confusing in a different way. It's detached. It's like when you're trying to perceive Maris, your brain is kind of struggling to put it together. And yeah, there's something deeply Lovecraftian about the way that this being, this undefined, shape shifting being, is difficult for us to understand, difficult for us to perceive, because our brain is trying to protect us from basically it collapsing, which is a very repeating theme with the different kind of eldritch beings in the general Lovecraft mythos. Now, that's not to say that Maris is an outer god or something. I think they're playing into the cosmic horror element of Lovecraft. The encounter with something so alien to us that it's difficult not only to describe it, but to just have your brain give it a shape. It exists in a dimension much larger than what your senses are capable of handling, essentially creating a sensory error, right? And that's what this sounds like. Now, about the slowing down of time, that's really interesting actually, because the fact that everything stays in place, it's as if it's submerged by water. So, this submerging that the track is doing really helps cover these movements that resemble the whale songs and the bird calls. By the way, if you slow down bird calls, you're also getting these types of textures. Let's say we're not used to hearing stuff like that. And this slight swelling of the high strings now, they're playing an articulation, a way of playing the bow that puts so little effort with so little pressure on the string and the bow. It's called flautando. Basically, the high strings are imitating a flute. Now, this also really plays into the blurring of the lines of what is this thing that I'm hearing. It's very wise to use this technique. This breaking in particular, again, this high flourish in the violin, it doesn't come together into a melody. It's a gesture. It's almost non musical. In a way, it is almost anti musical. Now, that's not to say that it's not beautiful or that it's not music. It does, however, go actively against the conventions of music that is most intuitive and familiar to us. There have been a lot of experiments with this type of music in the 20th century, most predominantly after World War I and II. And I would say that's a reasonable musical reaction to these wars. The introduction of the modern war is, in a way, an eldritch being, something much more dangerous, vicious, deadly, unbelievably destructive. Encountering these types of horrors, that can make a mind break. And when the mind breaks, the logic of the music breaks as well. Or at the very least, it's an interesting way of musically depicting this encounter with a larger than life and existence level of malevolence and danger. Yeah, it's definitely a harp, not a guitar. So yeah, this line that just came in the flute definitely shows me this is inspired by atonal music from the 20th century. There are examples from late Schoenberg, maybe some Ligeti. We have something that goes out of its way to be not intuitive to humans. Now, it's built on natural sounds, but they don't put themselves together in a way that is logical to our structures. This is something that's very, very smart to compose for depicting the idea of the music of the universe. Something that has cosmic rhythm, and therefore it works by a logic that far transcends what you could perceive. For example, if I were to sing four notes in a row, da, 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 this is happening in a short enough time for me, mere mortal with ADHD, to perceive it as music. Now, imagine that instead of singing it so fast, I would do a note once a day. If I would do that, I would be writing my musical rhythm based on the pacing of the rotation of the planet, which is approximately once every 24 hours. So if you have a note that's played once every 24 hours, and then there's one that's playing once every 30 days, another one that plays once every year, now you're starting to understand the idea of the music of the universe, because it's all about frequencies, cycles, and repetitions. But of course, it's so slow that it's difficult for us to perceive this movement. But yeah, the low tempo, low movement of the track, I definitely feel is kind of evoking this type of cosmic music. Also, check it out, there's something here that's really cool, even though we're in this soup of music. They're still finding ways to accentuate the contrast, because this phase isn't really static, it has developments in levels of contrast and levels of dissonance. And here they're doing it by putting in a very low instrument and right after it a very high instrument, opening up the range in a very dramatic way. Usually, that level of detachment can really break apart the coherence of what we're listening to. But here, let's say our suspension of musical disbelief has already been set pretty high. That's crafty. The harp here is doing what I'd call for this a pseudo melody. It's doing something that is technically melodic, although it's so atonal that it's kind of hard to perceive as anything that you can latch onto. Not only that, they put it so deep in the mix, it's so soft within the track that when you listen to it, when you try to focus on it, it rears its head occasionally. Tee-da-da-da-da. For a second, but then it disappears into the general blur of dissonance again. This is really similar to Lovecraft's description of trying to perceive that eldritch entity. It starts to make sense, it starts to look like something, and then it breaks apart again. This idea of things that exist in a non-Euclidean space, so some like a space that's made purely of just angles, and things are living in those angles. It's like a framework for the programming of the universe. And between these angles, there are entities that can move, that can travel, they can hunt, and you can't perceive them, and you can't protect yourself. I find it terribly fascinating, and I think it was done really, really well here. It requires a lot of restraint and a lot of constant balance of dissonance. This isn't easy to do. When you try to make something that is random, you're bound to fall into some human patterns. It requires meticulous crafting to get to these levels of control over the dissonance, over the shape, and the lack thereof. So here we had kind of the middle point of this phase. This isn't necessarily a mechanical middle point, just within the track of the first phase itself. The phase is kind of divided into two main sections. This second part is more percussive, and it begins with this percussive statement of taco, 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 taco. Now, when it comes on top of the rhythm that we've had so far, this very slow pulse that is essentially the opposite of a dance. When this comes in, right after the track goes a little bit quiet, yeah, it throws you off. It's something that doesn't belong there. Check out this transition again and see how it's something that's almost counterintuitive to the rhythm we've had so far. The owl is back. Now I stand corrected. This portion isn't more percussive. It's just that the lines are more closely woven. They start interrupting each other. It becomes even hard for any of them to catch our attention because they keep running each other over. It's much more dense when it comes to when these parts come in, but it's not that they're making more sense than before. We just heard the piano so many times that we kind of let go of trying to see where it's going. It's not going anywhere. The more we listen to it, the more our brain has the tendency to try and let go, to try and see the bigger picture, try and see all of this as some texture instead of something that we're supposed to follow closely. I think one of the words that people would use to describe this track is the word ambient, which I find to be very interesting because it could be said about a lot of very different types of music. And I think a part of the beauty here is that it becomes ambient because it's impossible to objectify. If my brain can't read it as an object in space, it would eventually, given enough time, yield and say, okay, I guess it is the space. And so this track is ambient in the sense that it doesn't have an objective. And we'll definitely dig more into that when we talk about lore, but for now, let's get this breakdown to the end. And in the end, we're left with the very, very high solo violin, letting the whole thing disappear, dissolve before our very eyes. And all that's left is this high ringing of what the hell just happened. As if we are left with confusion and horror and just this sense of something that was broken within us. It's so very cool. By the time you have any semblance of what's going on, it's too late. But we're not too late, we're just in time because it's lore o'clock. Now let's begin with the name. Maris is a Latin word that says of the sea. This, of course, connects to all of the aquatic themes in Maris's design, in the attacks. Now, we will get back to it shortly, but before, let's check out the augur description for the expedition. An unknown entity that drifts through the skies. It makes an ocean of its surroundings, that it may blend with whatever life it's found, as if in a dream. Exercise caution, warriors. The enemy may not always be that which can be seen. Now, already this description is very, very interesting. And it begins from the very name of the expedition, Augur. Augur is an official that is like doing divination in ancient Rome, somebody who foretells the future based on omens. Basically, those who see signs and patterns of the universe and therefore can foretell the trajectory of things to come. But the rest of the description doesn't really support that. We only learn why Maris is called Augur, perhaps in the item description for the Knight of Maris. But we will look at the rest of this description, and don't worry, we'll get to the Knight of the Fathom. I promise you will get there. It's an unknown entity that drifts through the skies. The first question I want to ask is, what do you mean unknown? You wrote this. And it's not just me being facetious, it's an important question to ask. You see, some items from Elden Ring were written in a way that shows they're describing some kind of cultural perception of events. It is told, it is believed, it's kind of being hinted at as something that is biased by subjectivity or at least a point of view. I genuinely don't know who would have that knowledge here. Perhaps the formless master, or maybe Duchess knows more than she lets on, which, I mean, she probably does. But I don't think this line is about the speaker not knowing. It's more about the entity being unknowable. It's about the entity being something we can't really perceive or fathom, something that we can't really put together, just like the first phase of the music showed us. It's an unknown entity that drifts through the skies. Now, this is once again an illusion to space. And it wouldn't be the first time we've had the universe described through the idea of water. We have the primeval current. A current is a stream, and that is described as something massive that is kind of a combination of mass, space, and time, which is an example from Elden Ring for an unperceivable cosmic power, perhaps even an entity. But a current is a stream. Here we're talking about this being making an ocean of its surroundings. And that really resembles for me these different layers of the Lovecraft mythos cosmology. In said cosmology, our universe is infinite, and there are a couple of more layers that are more infinite than that. How is it possible? You can't perceive it. Doesn't matter. Our human logic can't understand it. It doesn't make sense to us because we can't make sense of it. Now there are eldritch beings that live in those other layers, and they are either sleeping or unaware or uncaring about our existence, or in some other cases, very interested, but only for their own entertainment. Regardless, the fact that Maris turns its surrounding into an ocean is something we can see as an effect in the game, especially in the invasion. When Maris appears in the middle of a run instead of at the end, we can really see these spheres of water. And when we go into it, we see these effects of like bubbles, and it seems like it is turning its surrounding into an ocean. Now, if you remember what we said about the nature of ambience and the first phase, this is what the phase is doing. The phase is doing what Maris is doing. It's turning the surrounding into an ocean. But why? It does it so it may blend with whatever life is found. It seems like it wants to connect specifically with life. which is interesting because the sea is often an allegory or symbolism that's used for death. Now, the rain that's closing in on the map, that's also a usage of water, but that is definitely not to blend with the life that's there. That is like killing stuff, especially if you have extra damage in Deep of Night. And I think the last part here is the most telling about the Lovecraftian inspiration, as if in a dream. Now, we're having multiple parts connected here that even go all the way back to Bloodborne. One of the powerful old one, Cause, is washed ashore from the sea. And there's this entire idea in Bloodborne of the Dreamlands, right? A space in which things could be controlled and manipulated for very powerful, high intellect individuals, which are very rare. Usually, you'd find eldritch entities manipulating that area much more easily, as we see in the Hunter's Nightmare. Now, I'm not saying that Maris is cause, or some say cosm. Not that, but I think it definitely is trying to create a common space of existence between whatever it is and what we are. This will become a lot clearer when we take a look at the Night of the Fathom. Speaking of, the night belonging to Maris, left upon its defeat. The power of its namesake can be unlocked by performing a relic rite. For the first time in its existence, the drifting ancient being realized its interest had been piqued. Indeed, it had been roused from its aimless life of floating, camouflaged within its surroundings. The strange taste of this night was all too lonely, and more vast than it could ever know. That's a mind blowing description for multiple reasons. So we learned that Maris is drifting about. We knew that much, but we get the kind of stamp of approval that it is ancient. And here we have this theme of its interest being piqued. Now, if you remember, when we covered Caligo, we had a very similar description of something that lives so very long and really kind of, is a library of knowledge, just watching over everything. And something within the night specifically caught its attention. Caligo got curious to see what would come of this particular disaster. Now, unlike Caligo, that was always watching, always writing down in her head, Maris was just kind of floating for an eternity. Without a direction, without an objective. Doesn't that sound so much like the first phase? Just a state of being that kind of camouflages Maris, just floating in space, generally unaware, perhaps powerful but deeply uncaring. But something was strong enough and interesting enough to catch the attention of an unbelievably ancient being that didn't give a damn about anything. This could allude to the fact that the God of Night is something even more powerful than this cosmic entity, something that got it to kind of care for the first time. Imagine what you need to be to inspire an ancient eldritch creature. Indeed, it has been roused from its aimless life of floating. Now, the word roused would kind of imply a state of sleep beforehand, which is not only interesting because Maris inflicts sleep, but also because there is a god in Lovecraft's mythos that partially inspired the old one from Demon Souls. And that god is called Azathoth. It is also titled the Blind Idiot God. Now, just because it's stupid and blind doesn't mean it's not terribly dangerous. It's so dangerous that even eldritch beings are needed to lull him to sleep with like the playing of a flute. Because if Azathoth wakes up, the universe is destroyed, the entirety of it. So once again, we have this depiction of an unaware, uninvolved god, but something piqued its interest and it got up. Now, this could be kind of a subversion of what happens with Azathoth, because what if the end of the universe is what wakes Azathoth up? And so the attempt of the God of Night to end existence is, in a way, an end of the world that piqued the interest of Maris. But it still leads me to that last line that I find unbelievably interesting. The strange taste of this night was all too lonely and more vast than it could ever know. Why does bro have to drag taste into this? Maris, liquor of night. But in all seriousness, the idea of loneliness, it brings up the question, who wrote this? And why would they choose to say that the night has a strange taste of all things? I don't think they use that expression with other nights, but it does imply that the reason Maris is trying to encompass everything around it so it can blend with it in an ocean is because Maris was lonely. Now, if it was floating forever and it wasn't caring, perhaps the idea of loneliness only began with the night. And perhaps after an infinity of time just floating in space, discovering that there is more just to see it destroyed. Tragic turn, another bittersweet ending for these bosses. The night drew them in, but we're putting them down. And it doesn't always seem that it's for their own good. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. Now, the design of Maris's model has a few elements in it. One, it has a visual similarity to the Elden Beast. This is something we'll re-examine after phase 2, but I think this is an intentional similarity. The question is for what reason? Beyond that, Maris definitely has an aquatic design and is mostly resembling a jellyfish. The closest species of jellyfish I can think of for that design, nerd, is the compass jellyfish. It has a combination of these long, like velvety tendrils with a very painful string and outer layer of smaller strings and something that resembles an eye on the top of it, which will become very, very apparent when we talk about the Everdark phase of this boss. And I can definitely see how a jellyfish would be a significant choice specifically for Maris, beyond the fact that the shape of a jellyfish is very alien to us. It's very difficult to relate to. It also makes a lot of sense with the fact that Maris was floating around. It was letting the current dictate its movement. It wasn't moving with agency. So that's one thing. On a side note, the mini jellyfish babies that Maris is sending our way, they look more like a moon jellyfish. And that is sending us in a different direction. And if you're really frustrated with me cutting this explanation in the middle right now, I know what you can do to kind of let out your energy. Just hit that bell real good. And so I guess it's time for another uninterrupted listening, this time of phase 2. This is a lot more directional. And even tonal. It's all descending. The high strings are kind of imitating the piano here for a second. Now it's rising. And it's gathering this dance of night meter. Kind of fading into obscurity. This is so cool. So after reading the Fathom of Night item, in which first phase Maris is kind of floating aimlessly, now we have something that's a lot more melodic a lot more directional. Sure, it doesn't have a lot of contrasting movements, or the melody doesn't develop a lot. It's still moving slowly, but it's a lot more coherent. That piano is descending like Maris is descending from the cosmos to kind of see what the night is up to. And that piano was kind of hiding in everything on the first phase. It kind of moving between two notes, rolling from one side to the other, asleep. And now we really have like da 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 da. It's really descending in a very, very driven way, as if it was now given purpose or direction for the first time in its life, like the item is saying. It's really, really cool. Let's hear it from the beginning. We have this little trill, right? Percussion. And a much faster movement than before. Now, every once in a while, you'll have this little trilling moment, this little like flourish of either the strings or the flutes, something that we said really correlates with beauty in the rest of the soundtrack. With Caligo, the same with Noster, this musical idea of awakening, like birds singing in the morning. It really helps give Maris this lonely and somber, almost pathetic vibes. Let's continue. Da dee da da dee da 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 da. The strings are kind of waking up. They have a much more driven movement. Not only is it going up and down and it's faster, it is becoming more and more melodic, more and more communicative. And in the background, we still have a synthesizer kind of driving up and down the pitch, so you can get this still sound of whale calls in the back. Like, they're still keeping that aesthetic, but now the framework is a lot more digestible, a lot more musically. Yeah, communicative is the word I would use for this. It communicates. Here, there was like a small taste of Hailstore's theme. Because in Hailstore's theme, we've had da 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 da. And here we have like this glimpse, right? This moment of attention piqued. And we have that as kind of a pivotal moment that is summed up with this cymbal hit. Now we have a lot more, and a lot more engaged version of Maris. And the piano from the beginning. Now all of the motifs are coming together. In the background, we've had da 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 da. While the strings are doing that, we have the woodwinds kind of doing the descent from the high notes down to the low. We have basically contrary motion. Da dee da da dee da 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 dum. General movement upwards in the strings and general movement downwards with the woodwinds. Very, very effective and very cool. Yeah, this is entirely a gesture of gracefully getting interested and involved. And it's not fully dancing yet, but it feels a lot more intentional. It's not a moving story in itself yet. It's not melodic to that degree, but it is definitely not a static image anymore. This is a depiction of a process, of a movement. And even though it's very, very restrained, I do think it's for a good reason. Sometimes less is more, especially when you want to evoke curiosity. In Libra's fight, there was so much information that what we got was panic. We got overwhelmed. Here, it gives you something to pique your interest. In a way, the game is inviting you to be in the same position as Maris, to be curious. And I think that's great. I love it. Which means it is time for unhinged speculation. And remember, I don't have a tinfoil because I'm crazy. I have a tinfoil because I'm cooking. So, these little jellyfish that Maris is sending our way, these jellyfish don't resemble a little version of Maris. They look like a different type of jellyfish, particularly a moon jellyfish, which is a very interesting thread to kind of try and pull at because there's something there. If I'm not mistaken, in Japanese, when you write the generic name for jellyfish, it's comprised of two kanji, which is sea and moon. So basically, the jellyfish is a little moon of the sea. This has too many implications and connections. Let's mention a few so we can start breaking it apart. In Papuan mythology, you have Irumia. Irumia is like a gigantic spirit, like a mother of jellyfish. Basically, the connection between jellyfish and motherhood. In Australian Aboriginal mythos, there's a connection between jellyfish and dreams, dreaming time. So this constant connection to the moon, to motherhood. This is something that we can't just skip by. In Polynesian mythology, the jellyfish is connected to a fertility goddess. Now, do we have anyone in Elden Ring that kind of combines both the moon and motherhood, and perhaps an interest in space affairs? Well, we have Renala. On its face, it would be a pretty odd connection, but there is a specific point in Maris's description about loneliness. I can only imagine that's part of what broke Renala after Radagon left. Now, it's not exactly a smoking gun, but I'm pretty sure Maris and Renala are depicted in the same pose when Renala is kind of cradling the egg and when Maris is kind of falling asleep on its back, spreading like sleep around. I think it's in phase 3. These connections aren't to say that Maris is Renala. I look at it the same way as I look at everything in Nightreign. It gives us another lens to re examine things from Elden Ring, perhaps in a light that we didn't before. Now, the Elden Beasts, which we said Maris kind of resembles a little bit, it fell down to the lens between the shooting star sent by the Greater Will. Now, Maris wasn't exactly sent, the interest was picked and Maris followed. But who's to say that the Greater Will didn't pique the interest of the cosmic being that is the Elden Beast? Also, Maris's design as a jellyfish kind of connects it to the moon, which makes you question, well, is that the beast that would fall into the world if Ronnie, for example, were to ascend to godhood without choosing her moon ending? The reason why I'm thinking of Ronnie is because even though most of the sleep elements are connected to Saint Trina, Ronnie does put Kale to sleep when she meets us at the beginning of Elden Ring. It's also important to remember that jellyfish do exist in Elden Ring. Spirit jellyfish do exist. If I remember correctly, either the souls of people who have died or specifically children who have died. So if the knight is an unstoppable bringer of death, it would make sense that one of its vassals, the one that sees the omens, sees the future of it coming, that it would be something that resembles that tragic transformation into a spirit. Also, for the most part, it is very rare to see one of these jellyfish alone. Usually, in Elden Ring, we see them in groups. So, at the very least, I do think Maris's design is extremely well thought out because it's connected to the tapestry of the Lands Between in so many ways. It feels very intentional, if nothing else. And boy, do I love it when a plan is coming together. One more thing to mention in phase 3, I think Maris goes away for a second, then it becomes a lot larger. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then it's drenched in this purple hue. Now, that's as if the engagement with the knight and the fight with us have brought it to the point in which it is more alive, more physical than it was before, because it adds the color red into it. And the color blue is very much connected to, magic, cerebral, kind of the mind, while the color red is all about vitality. So adding that color in there kind of blends it with something that is alive. It also gives a lot of meaning to what we saw in the item description, or more correctly, in the expedition description, where it's seen that Maris is trying to blend with any type of life. But beyond that, there is one more design decision that I think is worth bringing up. The expedition is called Augur, the one who reads omens and sees trajectories. Now, if you recall, I did mention that Maris looks to me like a compass jellyfish, partially because it has the kind of drawing of an eye on its cap. Third phase Maris has a human eye, like stuck at the top. Before we had like this little ball of light like the Elden Beast has. That does not stay that way in phase 3 of Maris. It has a very unsettling human eye. And so it makes full circle back to the idea of why it's called the Fathom of Night. Not only are we having difficulty to perceive it, the story of Maris is the story of a being so detached that finally, for the first time in its life, is perceiving anything. Its eye has been opened. Yeah, there's something deeply uncomfortable looking at that. It feels wrong. And I do think it's staying very loyal to the Lovecraftian inspirations of this boss design. And one more question to bring up, I guess, and you guys can tell me in the comment section below what you think, but that so-called nuke that Maris is slowly dropping. Personally, in my head, I think the design intention is for it to be a tear, to evoke that sadness and water. Like, I think that's a pretty clever inclusion of something symbolic within the mechanical. But you tell me what you think it means, and if you think it's connected to anything. I really wonder if we're going to see this pattern of being more coherent, more melodically directional, more harmonically coherent, if we're going to see more of that in the third phase. But there's only one way to find out, so without further ado, an uninterrupted listening to phase 3 of Maris. It's definitely a whale song. Oh, a little plucky synthesizer. Papa. Papa. It's dancing. The dance of night is here. It's really like... Ah, that sounds a little bit like Hellstore's theme. And it has this, like, a movement of when a jellyfish is, like, actively swimming in a direction. Oh, so cool. Just pizzicato strings. So graceful. And gentle. Ooh. That's so much movement. That's amazing. And just the harp and the piano. Oh, and now the harp is staying alone at the end. Oh, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, okay. Let's dive straight into breaking it down because I really like how this phase develops. It has a lot of elements that, even though they are not a huge melodic statement that goes a lot of places, changes scales or whatever, it doesn't need that. It has a much stronger rhythmic drive beneath it from the strings that really imitates that floating, not only floating, the active swimming of a jellyfish pushing in a direction. Beyond that, there's just all these brilliance moment here of awe and beauty. This announces the new alien appearance of Maris. The lower strings that are swelling up, this is something that kind of makes you brace yourself for the occasion. Something meaningful is taking place. We often connect the sound of low pitch to things that are big and things that are far away because low frequencies, one, are usually generated by something big that's moving them, and also, they travel longer distances. That's why when you're outside the club, what you'll hear is the basses. So we psychoacoustically connect it to things that are big in size and far away from us. And it really creates this sense of importance about this entry. Beautiful. We have a dancing pulse now, consistent. Ba, 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 ba. Da, 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 da. This is a melodic statement, proper melodic statement with repetition, variation. It's an entire phrase. Now, this is already much more pointed than everything we got up until now. Up until now, we've had phase one, every instrument had its own like couple of notes it was playing. Phase two, there was like a general descent or a general ascent depending on the instrument. Here we have a melodic line that both ascends and descends, making it a more varied melodic line that has more independence and direction. It wants to go somewhere. It has gravity pulling it in one direction and its willpower pulling it in another. Very, very effective. Ta da 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 from Hailstor's theme. And the opening menu theme, I think, has it as well. Oh, such a beautiful moment. Now, the harmony is coherent enough so we can feel when we have a change in color beneath a staying note above. Something we can do to move the melody along is to either change its note, right? We can move to another note, or we can change the context around that melody. And that shift is happening here. It's so beautiful. Check it out. Which kind of is coloring the note that the strings are holding in a more bright harmonic color. There's something about the sound is opening up. There is something that's brightening in a way it didn't before, and that is very emotionally potent. Just a very gentle dance. There is something that you can latch onto. It does blend with life. It does get a direction. It's an entire arc for Maris within these three phases. Really, it's fascinating. Again, this thrill of beauty. That's such a cool kind of an anxious run of the strings. Taka, 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 taka. And the choice of notes is just dissonant enough to feel challenging harmonically, but not remotely similar to what we had in the first phase. Just listen to that specific sound with which the strings are kind of agitating themselves towards this big break. Oh, so good. This this also felt like a variation. Here, there is also a touch of that here. This is melodically so much richer because it's moving in a pacing that we can engage with. It's living in our reality for a second. Beautiful. Finishing with the whale and the harp, right? That harp that in the first phase was difficult for us to pick out of the chaos and the mess, even though we tried. Here, we're left with that, specifically with a single note pulsing. So it ties us back to the way that the first phase began. That is a beautiful, beautiful conclusion to the arc of Maris's theme. So I know it's been a while since the last video, but I was kind of working on projects that I can't wait to share with you that I'm really excited about. Until then, I will try to get the Gladius video out a lot sooner than this took. But beyond it, don't forget, hydrate, stretch, take good care of yourself. Let me know how you're doing in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.